Welcome everybody. It's great to see so many of you who choose to attend this webinar, especially with all those many online events to attend. So thank you I'm really grateful that you're choosing to spend the next 40 minutes together. So as Christina mentioned, so I'm Elodie from Dream, Sparkle and Shine, and today we're going to look at how to have impactful conversation and meetings. So my intention for this workshop is really for you to discover ways to really have impactful conversation and meetings. So we're going to try to help you to deliver really what matters and communicate in a productive way. So this webinar is not a quick fix, right? You'll definitely need to bring commitment and practice of the tools that we're going to do with together today. So I'll just do a quick intro on who I am. So I'm Elodie Levasseur, and I'm the head of international marketing for Universal Publishing Production Music, and I'm also a brain-based coach. And so my mission in life is really to help people to become extraordinary leaders and to create a world-class business and life. And over the past 15 years, I've been leading teams within international environment. And I worked in senior marketing roles for various industries. So from financial services to higher education, luxury fashion, tourism, and even entertainment. So, and 2 years ago, I wanted to gain new skill for my professional and personal development. So I trained as a brain-based coach with a Neuroscience Leadership Institute. And actually what that helped me is to develop communication and engagement techniques that are based from research carried out by neuroscientists to actually help a person thinking in a brain-friendly way. And ultimately it creates changes that last. So that's what I do on the side. And so I run workshops and online program. So you can go and see and check out my website on Dream, Sparkle and Shine. And I help people to really establish this strong connection of who they are so that they can become effective leaders in our society. So today we are going to have a look at how you can have impactful conversation in meetings. So we will explore a tool or a technique that will help you to collaborate better to actually deliver what matters. So first we'll have a look at how our brain's capacity, what is our brain's capacity to communicate effectively? So we'll go through that first. And then we'll have a look at this technique or tools that I've told you about on how you can ruthlessly prioritize to deliver what matters and how to get to the essential, especially when you're in that meeting and that important conversation that you're going to have. How does that sound? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Everybody's okay with that? We're ready to go? Perfect. Great. So this webinar will last about 40 minutes and I'll aim to finish by 1:10 p.m. So you can go and have lunch after. Or for those who are listening the recording, we'll try to keep on time. So I suggest that you have a pen and a notepad at hand so that you can do the exercise. You can take notes so as we go through each topic, because this will be interactive. I'll ask questions, you can put your answer in the chat, but most importantly is really for you to take away what we're going to do today, like the exercise we're going to do today. So really take notes. That would be good for you. And I also encourage you to put your phone down or in plane mode or not in sight if possible, because it could get in the way of your focusing and your learning. What we do know is that we can't multitask. You know, actually only 2.5% of the global population can actually multitask, and they're called supertasker. But sadly, I'm not one of them. So even if we think we can multitask, our brain is actually tricking us, and we can quickly shift our thinking between one thing to another. And this makes us think that we're a multitasker. But we can surely walk and talk at the same time because it's embedded in our brain already. However, what we can do is listening to something new or trying to focusing and trying to do emails at the same time. You're most likely to make mistakes. So don't send that email if you're listening to this workshop. And if we run out of time at the end of this webinar, you'll be able to contact me on LinkedIn or email if you have any questions. So feel free to do so, just in case we run out of time for questions. So let's have a look first at why is it so hard to focus, to concentrate when we want to have productive conversation and we are basically overwhelmed with information. So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about our cognitive capacity, which is basically the amount of information we are able to pay attention to and to process at any given moment. So it's really essentially your brain's capacity to communicate effectively. And to have impactful conversation and to be able to communicate effectively, this is important for you to know what your brain looks like. So, and especially this cognitive capacity, because it's actually managed by your prefrontal cortex. So we call it the PFC, which is the front part of your brain. And this is a part of your brain that's responsible for complex cognitive behavior, such as decision-making, creativity, when you're planning, your attention. So basically the thinking part of your brain. So that's when you're thinking, it's a logical part, so the front part of your brain. And the PFC is limited on how much information it can hold at any one time. So it can actually hold between 3 to 7 pieces of information at any one time. So 7 is probably like stretching it, right? So 3 is a number you want to remember, as it will really help you to communicate 3 things effectively when you're having a conversation. And before a conversation or a meeting, probably think about what are the 3 things that you need to get across to either your audience, your team, so that they want, what is it at the main 3 things that you want them to remember. So when I do my talks, I always have like 3 things that I want to share. And at the end, I recap. I do, okay, this is the 3 things you need to remember. And I do this in my presentation, which is actually a really good tip for if you are going to do a presentation, you know, the main key takeaway, the main 3 things you're taking away. So it's asking yourself, what are the 3 things you want your audience to take away? So when the PFC, your prefrontal cortex, your logical brain, gets overloaded, and it gets really tired actually really easily. So if you didn't drink enough water, for example, or you didn't get enough sleep, your prefrontal cortex gets tired, and you probably know that when you're experiencing it. And if you focus your attention on a very long time and having no breaks, then your PFC gets also tired. And what research shows is that the PFC share cognitive resource with the limbic system. So that's another word for you. So this is a part of your brain that's involved in motivation, in emotion, and in learning. So think about it as the emotional, the feeling part of your brain. This is a feeling, the emotional part. So when your PFC, your logical brain, is actually actively processing information, so it's focusing. So the reactivity of your limbic system, your emotional brain, is diminished. So this means that you are operating with optimal executive functioning. So what that means? It means that if you are focusing and you're not thinking about your emotional part of yourself, you're focusing on what you're sharing so that you can get your point across. So this is the optimal state for you to have this executive functioning part of your brain. And when you're thinking clearly, when you're focused, your limbic system automatically dumps down so that you're able to think clearly and to make decisions easily. So the dynamic is also true when you reverse it. So when your limbic system is too active, then your logical part of your brain are diminished. So think about when you are too emotional, when you're too tired, when you're too frightened, or even if you're too ecstatically happy, then your prefrontal cortex, your thinking part of your brain, can't think clearly. It's actually quite fuzzy. So that's something to think about. It doesn't have to be bad. It could be super good, but that's mean because it's an emotional part of you. So before a conversation, it's actually a great idea to check where you're at. How do you feel? And maybe do some grounding exercise or breathing exercise to quiet or dampen down your emotional brain. Even during this past year or during this current reality or any reality, we've been thinking about, we think about our current project or to-dos or safety or team safety, your home duty, your family's health, your finances, and probably more, right? And we have so much information we need to keep track of at the same time, really. So our cognitive efficiency is really impacted, and we are more likely to overlook critical information. So what does that mean? So when we have an overload of information, when we have this information overload, it's actually harder to manage our own emotion. It's harder to make decisions. It's harder to communicate effectively. And it's also harder to recognize what other people are feeling. So you're not really listening deeply to yourself and to others because you can't. So the human brain is actually wired to detect both the danger and the opportunities. And the primary function of the brain is to keep us alive, right? So the presence of threat, of danger, which actually can be fatal if ignored, affects us more intensely than the possibility of the reward, so of the opportunities. So I'll give you an example. So during a crisis, so any type of event, whether that's COVID, a divorce, moving house, a health issue, whatever you've got going on in your life that look like a potential threat, so the threat level in your brain naturally increase. And what we do is we keep reinforcing it with new threats coming your way because we're questioning, we are going into the what if mode. Oh, am I going to be safe? Am I going to be safe to going to the shop or taking public transport? Will I make enough money? Is my job secure? Is my family going to be healthy? What if, what if, what if? So we go into that mode and our cognitive capacity gets reduced. So while we are processing all of those information at the same time, we're having different bodily reaction, right? So not only yourself, but also the people you're talking to. So it's quite interesting to notice that. So, and there is 4 different bodily reactions that you can have when you are triggered by those threat mode. So flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. The fight reaction is when you become irritable, you become angry. The flight is when you show anxiety, fear, or you go into the what if. The freeze is when you get stuck, you're immobilizing, you get like you're spacing out. Even shame come in the way when you're freezing. And fawn is when you become people pleasing, you try to avoid conflict. It's actually difficult to say no, or even to set boundaries is very hard. And in whatever way we react, we pull away from those resources from our logical part of our brain so that we can deal with what's in front of us. So when we are working with those limited set of our brain resource, it's like this difficult event in our life, or when we've got too much going on, we still need to deliver what matter and communicate effectively so that we can have those impactful conversations. And sometimes it's really hard, right? So the idea, it's vital for you to find ways to reduce that part of your emotional brain. So this arousal, so that you can give space for and resources to your prefrontal cortex, your logical part of your brain, to think clearly. And those are called intentional behavior that will help you to basically be in a more positive state. So I'd love you to think about, before I share a couple of them, I would love you to write in the chat what could be your intentional behavior that you can apply next time that you feel overwhelmed or you've got too much going on before going to a meeting or before having this important conversation. How can you reduce this arousal in your limbic system, this emotional part of your brain? So write into the chat. So it's great to share what others would be doing. So we've got Christina would be doing a breathing exercise. Very good, because breathing actually clear your brain. So does anyone who wants to share? And in breathing exercise, actually, Christina, you've got these 4-4-4 breathing techniques where you breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, and then you're taking a deep breath into your stomach. You hold it for a count of 4, and then you release the breath through your mouth, and you're counting for, it's 4-4-4 basically. So you do this without a break for like 3 or 4 times in a row. And that's a good technique. So yeah, breathing and meditation, definitely. The other things is you can take a short walk. You can ground yourself, before going to that meeting or this conversation, or you've got an overload of information. It could happen at any time. You can walk barefoot into the garden or the park if you can. That's very, very grounding. You can do some journaling. You can write. You can label your emotion. Labeling your emotion is key as well. That's becoming aware of what you're feeling. And you can write it down. I'm feeling, I'm feeling angry. And then you've labeled that emotion. You can reframe. You can look at the situation from a different perspective. You can also look at some aromatherapy and like sniffing something, like essential oil, or even you can light a candle. So that will actually reduce your emotional part of your brain, your limbic system. Or you can dance, you can move your body, you can do some things that will take your mind off about what you're about to do. So that will actually reduce your overthinking brain. So now what I'm going to just share with you is, not that one. Now I'm going to share with you how you can work within this limit of cognitive capacity and find ways to deliver what matters so you can really have those impactful conversations. So I'd like you to think about when you were in a meeting recently, whether it was this morning or yesterday, or you had an important conversation, face to face, virtually, whatever it is. Did you feel that it was fast and efficient? Did you think that the discussion you had was productive? Did you think that you kept things moving? Like were you really proud of it and you could see things moving? So think about that, because to be able to have impactful conversation in meeting, we are going to have a look at one technique that I'm going to share with you. And this technique is how we can ruthlessly prioritize for yourself or with your team to define what is essential rather than the exhaustive, and actually why that matters. So this represents actually a bit what's going on in our brain probably right now, or when you're feeling overwhelmed, and you're being bombarded with loads of information. So if you look closely, some of them are really important and you are handling more priorities all at once. Like making sure that I have enough time for my family, staying up to date with the news, read or exercise for 30 minutes. What else do we have? Participate to a webinar for my professional development. Like today, remember to have lunch, explore virtual tools to increase my collaboration with colleagues. You need to check in with some co-workers. You need to prepare for your next meeting with a new client you're going to have. You need to go through 100 emails. So all of those things, this is what's going on for you at the same time. And so for many of us, conventional wisdom, or the default wisdom, is to be exhaustive. So do as much as you can, as quickly as possible. And some people think that they work best when they have so much going on, always something to do in a continuous way. So always with that what's next mindset. And they think that they work better and faster and that they achieve things quicker by doing that. So some people might feel this way, so you might recognize yourself, like, raise your hand if you think that's one of you. And if that's the case, this is actually recognized as a workaholic subpersonality. So that's actually when someone who works all the time and it feels this needs to do so in order to feel successful, in order to feel worthwhile. And however, when we look at the research, it suggests that we need to be very deliberate about what we actually choose to focus on to maximize your productivity and optimize our performance. So earlier, we looked at the limitation of the prefrontal cortex, your logical brain, and with the maximum capacity of information being held in the brain is from 3 to 7 at a stretch, right? And research suggests that we work much better when we have no more than 5 pieces of information at the same time. So 3 would be optimal. So remember, the brain loves 3. So try to chunk things down and simplify all the information that you have in a meeting. The key number is 3 to remember. So how do we do this? Since everything is so important, right? So to help you to identify your priorities, we'll do a 3-step exercise. And it's called chunk, order, and reduce. So this technique is actually going to help you to, before you go to a meeting or you need to have an important conversation, it will help you to focus on what you need to share. And also it can be used in team while you're having a meeting with them. That's also quite useful. It can be used for you as an individual. So it's up to you how you want to use it, but you can use it in various ways. So let's start with the process of chunking. And when we are processing too much information at once, we need to simplify its presentation. And we do this by chunking information into categories. So an example might be to categorize information by effort, function, or process, Otherwise, you could categorize things like I did on the screen. I'm basing this on an individual basis, so to help prioritize before going to a meeting or sharing what's important. So staying sane would be a category that I would do, like looking after myself, so then I can be sane. General catch-up, creative work, important work, long-term planning. So these are examples of category. So let's pause for a moment, because I would like you to think, take on your piece of paper, just write down everything that you have to do at the moment. So don't categorize them, just write a list of everything that you've got to do right now. So all your priorities, just on that piece of paper. So it's a brain dump, and just write everything, just a few words. We don't want a sentence, just a few words. Just write down everything that you've got going on at the moment. I'll give you 30 seconds. Yeah, so anything that's going on, right? Project to-dos, project with your teams, or the projects you have on an individual basis, so really anything. So once you're finished to write that list, now I would like you to chunk them into 5 or up to 7 max categories, right? So you can actually group them. So now you've got your list, and some of them can be merged. Some of them can go under a list. So think about categories that you could actually put those to-dos or priorities into categories. So merge your to-dos, your priorities into categories. So you could have different categories, right? Event, finance, relationship, health, social media, creative, community, design, personal, website, could be marketing, sales, depending on your to-dos, because you will see that some of them are similar, right? They can go into a category. Content, analytics, could be personal or professional development. And it'd be great if you actually share some of your categories in the chat to help other people who are stuck with categories. So I've got some on the screen, but it'll be good to know, what are your categories? What is it that you are going to name your categories? And, maybe like one of your thoughts is, or to do, is to remember to read and exercise for 30 minutes, or even meditate, or even remembering to have lunch. So you could group that under, like, I would group this under staying sane. And another priority would be to check in with my team, to communicate with my coworker on a specific project, like send that email. I would add this into my general catch-up. So let me know if you have some categories that you want to share with a group, or not. It's completely fine. If you feel the call to do so, it's completely fine. Or maybe give me an indication you're finished, because I can't see any of you. But I'll give you 30 seconds more to put those into your categories. So we've got Matt, yeah, friends and family would be one category. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And then under that, you can write, Matt, what is it that are your to-dos under friends and family? Is it, making lunch for the family, or making dinner, or is it calling a friend? What friend? So those would be classified down. And then we've got Christina. I need to look into booking a holiday. Yeah, we should consider staying sane. Also eating lunch, exercise, and reading. Yeah, into staying sane. Yeah, that's perfect. That's a very good example, Christina. That's fantastic. And Cornelia, okay, finished. So you've got finance, health, development, creative, content, relationship. Perfect. Thank you, Cornelia. That's really the very good categories. Yeah. And Simona, you've got time management. Yeah, perfect. Yes. Time management could be a category, actually. You know, what is it that you need to have in your to-dos to have better time management? Great. So the second step, so at this point, we are going to go through the second step, which will be, once we've categorized our to-dos, we're going to work that, we're going to order them. So this is where you start prioritizing. So, and putting your chunk in order of importance, if that makes sense. So this is where basically, for example, here on the screen, what I'm sharing, what's important to me at the moment is to stay sane. And actually, you know, because it would be more important than creative work. So, and if I stay sane, I take my lunch, I do my 30-minute exercise, and I can do better creative work and I can focus better, right? And then the second one would be important work, like communicating with my team. I've got a project that I'm working on social media, and I need to get this done. So that would be under that. So order your different categories in terms of importance. What is your number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and up to 7 if you had 7 categories, but categorize them. So if you can order them, that's the idea, to order them. So once you've ordered them, at this point, it's really time to basically ruthlessly prioritize and really reduce with the third step. So the third step is to reduce. And this is going to be probably the hardest for most of us, because we've got those 7 categories or 5 categories. And so we need to reduce the order chunk with the top 3 that we are going to prioritize. You know, it's either the things that you really need to communicate with your boss, your team, or on an individual basis. It's really like the things that are super important to you. So let's say you had 5 categories and you need to reduce it to 3. So most of the time, you'd be very likely that your top 3 category, when you did the ordering process, might be the same, right? But not always, because it's an opportunity for you to reflect back, to actually review on what matters and what's important to you, to your team, to your business. So it's like going back to, okay, I'm going to focus on 3 categories, and this is, and because you're going to have to-dos under those categories. So you could probably do that at the beginning of the week to know this is what you need to achieve. And I'm choosing 3 because, as going back to the limitation of the PFC, the prefrontal cortex in crisis, because your brain is already tired, so you're focusing on 3. And you know that this is exactly, you know, the optimal way to increase productivity and optimize your performance. So 3 stays ideal, you know, and it's a great exercise to do with your team as well, together. What are our to-dos, what is our categories, and how can we order them and reduce them? So it's a really good idea to do this with your team. And I'll share the slides so that you can redo this exercise with your team or on your own at any time. And it's also probably worth noting that unconscious bias can actually lead you to prioritize the wrong thing during a period of crisis or uncertainty. So for example, it could be your safety bias because, you know, against taking unknown risk and you're not too sure, so you don't want to go there. It could be your experience bias, basing decisions from your prior experiences, or it could be your expedience bias, doing something in a hurry. And research shows that we have more than 150 unconscious biases in this world. So those biases can heavily influence the quality of your decision making. So something to think about when you are prioritizing, because when your brain is overloaded and when we can't think properly, we want to revert back to what's more comfortable for us, you know, the habitual stuff, because it's easier. So think about that when you are prioritizing about what you're going to share, how you're going to communicate. Is it easy? You don't want to have that talk to that boss because it's put you outside of your comfort zone, but actually you should have it because it will help you. So it's pushing yourself to think outside, to really and to be able to reduce and organize those priorities, you really need to try to mitigate those unconscious bias. And the best way to do that is when you are communicating those priorities with other people or your team, is to see, if you've considered all the options. Because that's really helpful, because your friends are going to tell you, no, you should definitely go after that promotion, and you should definitely ask for it, or it's about getting that into a priority. So as you're reducing your top priorities, just consider who needs to know this as well. Or if you're doing this with your team, it would be like sharing it with your team, but does anyone else need to know? Because communication is key here about your priorities, because there is always somebody else that needs to know. So this process, or this technique that I've just shared with you, does use some cognitive resources. So chunking, ordering, and reducing is actually an exercise that would work best to do it either first thing in the morning, or right after dinner, or after a physical exercise. So when your brain is fresh and rested, keep in mind that we're all different. But for me, I would prefer to do it first thing in the morning, because that's where I operate better. And for other people, it might be in the evening. It depends what works for you. See what could work, right? If you do this with your team, it's probably better to do it in the morning, so you get the majority of the people at their best. And this exercise really helps you to gain clarity, to see that doing everything at the same time is not helping you to go faster. And usually it's not necessary, especially if you are in a meeting or you start to see people disengaging or they lack of focus. This is actually a great exercise to add some positive impact on the next steps of this project. And remember that focusing on what we can achieve is key. So you want to remember, this is what we can achieve. And once you have clarities on clarity on those priorities, and then your team will also have a better understanding on what to focus on. So this is a real simple way to communicate effectively the importance of some project. Here we go. So today we've talked about our cognitive capacity and the amount of information that we're able to pay attention to and process at any given moment. So our brain's capacity to communicate effectively. So remember the rule of 3. And we've talked about intentional behavior that can be applied when you feel overwhelmed. So the breathing techniques, the journaling, the walk in the park. And we looked at how you can prioritize ruthlessly and really define what is essential to deliver, what matters, so you can have more effective meetings and conversation. And I would love you to use a chat function to let me know what is your biggest takeaway from today of this session. What is it that you are going to take away with you today and apply into your daily life? I really encourage you also to share this insight with anyone around you, because that's the best way to integrate it. So if you've learned a new way to categorize, if you didn't know about this exercise, then that's a great way to talk about it with somebody else, and even to apply it with somebody else, to even try it with somebody, to share it with somebody else. And think about who that person will be, because that's definitely, so we've got a couple of people. So the chunk your priorities and reduce them to 3. Yeah, perfect. The rule of 3, definitely. Keep that, the 3 is a number to remember, as I say. Yeah, I'd like to place creative work ahead of importance. Okay. Oh, thank you, Simona, for sharing. Yeah. And if it's not always possible, and maybe think about what gets in the way. Think really what gets in the way, and that would be another conversation, but yeah. And you have a meeting tomorrow, and this is exactly what you needed. Perfect, Hélène. I'm really glad that helps. Yeah. And use the rule of 3 to help to organize your thought. Definitely. Because that way you look more assertive as well, and you know what you're talking about. You've got these 3 things you want to talk about, and that's going to be key for that effective communication. And also about what is it that you want your audience or the person in front of you to remember. Your takeaway, Simona, is that I need to find discipline to follow this helpful takeaway. Simona, think about accountability partner. find somebody around, maybe within like this webinar today, maybe there is somebody else who needs to find discipline and you can help each other out. So reach out to Simona in the chat if you want to be that partner, because that could help you. So guys, thank you so much for participating today at this webinar. I hope this was useful and that you've discovered some key tips and, and the techniques that we shared today to have more impactful conversation, to prioritize ruthlessly, and so that you can deliver really what matters. So you can definitely keep in touch with me. I will share with you my my email in the chat, or this is basically, you'll definitely get on the top of the recording, you'll get the slides, so you can definitely have a look at this exercise again. And if you have questions, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, feel free to reach me on email, and I'd be more than happy to have a chat with you.